Alan.
Alan would have gotten a kick out of that car.
That's about where the cold, hard facts end. Listeners, I tried. I really did.
I started my investigation in the usual fashion, digging up every piece of public record I could get. The paperwork is maddeningly typical up until 1955. Census records, soil samples, weather reports, hand-drawn survey maps, the beginnings of satellite photos, all readily available for anyone with the patience to walk themselves into a county office. Those materials don't tell me much, and I quickly am forced to turn to more dubious sources. Before the downing of multiple passenger planes and the subsequent establishment of the no-fly zone in 1962, crude aerial photos are taken and circulated. This is where things get interesting. I find fuzzy shots of what appears to be entire mountains relocating overnight, buildings disappearing and reappearing at random, and lakes filled with water or light, depending on the time of day. The resolution is dubious, making them inkblot tests in their own right. They are the stuff of dreams among amateur investigators and conspiracy theorists alike. The most outlandish, improbable, and extremely unverifiable stories came from breachers, people rumored to have jumped, tunneled, hot air ballooned their way through the walls. If they're to be believed, there is much to be uncovered. But more on that later. LIM technology is not paraded around in the press for long.
As the government withdraws acknowledgement that it ever existed, the public's interest similarly begins to wane. Last verifiable activity is an exodus of ARTA employees from the zone, beginning in 1981 and followed swiftly by a full decommissioning of the zone in 1987. After which, those 3,600 square miles are sealed away and left behind with no explanation. A tomb, minutes away from the populous, perfectly normal city of Seattle, with decades of history and secrets locked inside. And that is where I'm left to fill in the enormous, ill-defined gaps.
That was quite the ride. Enjoy yourself out there? Well, what do you know? You made it back. Wasn't too sure for a moment there. my gateway theory. I can't imagine why. It's just shooting things up into the oscillosphere and back. No big deal.
So that's the history of the Olympic exclusion zone. We know it absolutely existed.
And that something blighted the area. Dr. Ophelia Turner was a real person who grew up there, and limb technology, claimed to be her invention, was the reason the zone was created. The facts point to either the pursuit of limb or the technology itself doing something terrible to the area, and maybe even to the people who stayed behind. For such a vast, valuable area as the Olympic
Peninsula to be lost to the world for the indefinite future, someone needed to take the fall. The evidence in this corner paints the target square on the martyr part of this equation. Or did Dr. Ophelia Turner know what she was unleashing upon her homeland? If she did it willingly, then she would have been a monster. What if the government strong-armed her into it? Then she would have had no choice but to become a martyr. To answer that question, we need more information still.
Good news. I can replicate Alan's suppression method. We'll stand some chance of holding the gamma ray burst from the well. Where the years later, my late husband still manages to impress. They're figuring out how to keep you alive once the reaction gets going, however. That's harder. But I have an idea. Francis, I need your ear.
Go on.
We know that as soon as the car gets to the well, the trigger will be instant. Once this remnant expends its energy, gamma radiation will erupt from the well, and the driver will be at ground zero taking the worst of it.
Can we activate the gateway as soon as they make contact?
It's tricky. Too early, and we may interrupt whatever reaction process the remnant carries out. Too late, and it's bad news for the driver. There's too many unknowns.
Do you force 100,000 people out of
Their homes without facing major resistance. Even if you're the United States government, facing down what's being peddled as the greatest threat our nation has ever faced, the answer is, we don't. This is Frequency File, Episode 3. Human Cost. Last episode, I reported all the cold, hard facts I could get my hands on. If you missed that episode, here's the summary. There wasn't much.
Now, we jump tracks to the stories of the people, to knit together old records and eyewitness accounts to form some fabric of the true story. Whoever's job it was at ARDA to suppress stories
Did a really good job. What they did to keep that sheer number of people from talking, and then to smear the stories that did come out, was a masterstroke of obfuscation. Unfortunately for ARDA, the cases that made it all the way to court became public record. And the facts were these. ARDA played nice at first with a generous relocation package. They offered cold, hard cash and built sprawling housing complexes in nearly every state to resettle the former residents. These new communities were built as idyllic, white picket-fenced neighborhoods where you were sure to be surrounded by all-American families who shared your same values, while enjoying the benefits of government-subsidized grocery stores, school districts, and manicured public parks. Not a bad deal from the looks of things. When it came to the holdouts, the people who wouldn't leave for any amount, things got ugly. But in the end, the government won out, as it always does. And while the government has the sovereign right to seize private property, the Fifth Amendment mandates just compensation be paid for it. And it doesn't specify when or how this compensation be made, and many dissenters ended up with nothing through good old loopholes and bureaucracy.
some of whom are still pursuing their claims to this day.